Moshi Moshi.
Hello.
I'm Zev Ramsbotham.
And I'm Annie Ramsbotham.
And we're the Rambling Ramsbothams.
And we're trying to figure out a new intro for this podcast, so...
Well, I am. I don't think Annie is, but...
Yeah, I was like, let's just keep it going. We've been going strong for like 85 episodes, and that was Zev's exact reason to change it.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it just seems a little kind of like...
Something fresh.
Yeah, like a little... I don't know, I've just been doing it so long, and I don't know, it'd be nice. Well, sometimes I listen to other podcasts, and I'm like, man, I really like their intro. And then I have some podcasts I listen to where they like change the music or like change the intro. So...
Well, if you have an idea, let us know. But this week, we're going to give a little Noto Earthquake update since last week. And we're going to talk about dragons and the Kanji of the year and a couple other things. But right now, we're in our apartment, which feels really good, especially after this time last week.
Yeah. And I mean, it's really wild how like drastic things, it just feels and looks so different. Because I mean, when we left our apartment, so in the last episode, we had like just left our apartment and we had some audio from when we were inside our apartment. And when I think back to like what our apartment looked like then, it's crazy to be like sitting in it now, just because it looked so bad. Like, we were in here, and this room was full of water, the room we're sitting in now.
Yeah. Now you can't even tell. So there was very minimal damage. We were really happy. We spent 2 nights in a hotel, which is from where we recorded the last week's podcast. And we returned on the 3rd. I was really not sure about if it was okay to return. I mean, the news was like, things are crazy, like, don't come here. But that was mostly farther north on the peninsula, and then our friends were like, well, it seems okay, like we have water.
The people that we knew that actually live like here in the Kanazawa Uchinada area. So
we were like, okay, I guess maybe let's just go, and if the roads are clear enough to get there, they'll be clear enough to leave if we need to leave. And so we bought some liters of water at the store and some snacks just to have like food and water in our car, and we drove back. There were a couple times we had to turn around because the roads were closed in certain spots, but overall it was pretty easy to get back to Uchinada.
Yeah, I don't think it was too difficult. It took longer than originally it said, but also partly that's our fault because by the time we were driving, the expressway was open. So we could have just gotten on the expressway, but we weren't 100% sure if it was open or if it was closed. I wasn't sure if it was
just open for emergency vehicles or
No, there were like normal cars on it. We saw it eventually and it was just like totally normal. And we're like, oh, we could have.
But we were fine. So we made it back and we went into the apartment, and it was actually a huge relief because it was way less damage than I expected. Really, there's just like bubbles in the wallpaper from where there was water. Our light fixture in this room that we're in is hanging.
It's dangling out of the ceiling.
Because it kind of like, I guess you had to take it off to get the water out of the light fixture itself, and then we don't know how to put it back on.
Well, so partly my fault, partly the first people that installed it, I don't think they installed it like up to par. Because I was trying to figure out how to remove it. So I read like that model's instruction guide on the internet, and the way I removed it is not the way, like there's some missing hardware up there. So they just kind of like screwed it into the ceiling.
It works.
But it's okay now because it's not full of water.
And the only thing we're missing is the light fixture in our bathroom doesn't work anymore because there was the most water in there, and then the Wi-Fi is still out. But those are very minor things. So I was
just thinking it's really interesting how like, I really thought when we came in there was still going to be like standing water everywhere.
Yeah.
But it just... But then this is kind of where I'm on the fence about if it's good or not. I guess it just like drained through the floor.
Yeah, I don't know what happened.
So it kind of says a lot, I guess, about the insulation and maybe the quality of the building, that all the water just seemed to flow straight through our apartment instead of collecting in our apartment. But we have had pretty much our dehumidifier running 24/7 since we got back, and the humidity level is fairly high, and it fills up so fast. So we've been like emptying it and just keeping it running. So there is some water in like some places in the floor. They're like not really like buckling.
Our floor doesn't creak anymore because
our floor doesn't creak anymore.
The floor swelled, so that's nice.
But you can see in some spots where it's like it's not buckled to the point of like damaging the floor, but you can see like little bumps.
Well, so that first day when we got back, the couch was fine, the bed was fine. So I was like, oh, thank goodness.
My chair I was really worried about that I'm currently sitting in.
Generally, the structure of the apartment is good, so that was a huge relief. We not camped, but I made Zeb drag the mattress out of the bedroom into the center.
I didn't drag it out of the bedroom.
I drag it out of the bedroom into the center of the apartment.
And really, this is where we're sleeping.
Because I was so worried, because it just is so scary. Because after the first earthquake, there have been aftershocks constantly, and none of them have been anywhere close to as strong as that first one, but they're strong enough that it's a little unsettling still.
Yeah, some have definitely been strong enough that it shakes the apartment for a little while, and you're sitting there
And so, I mean, our apartment, if it was an unsafe building to be in, they would tell us and not let us enter, but
I also don't think they would have fixed the water and fixed some of the electricity, and I think they would have just written it off.
I was still scared, so I dragged the mattress out into the middle of the apartment like that was going to do anything, but
in case we tip over.
Yeah, I don't know. We were away from all the windows that way, and so that first night we didn't have any water, and we didn't turn on the electricity in any rooms except for the back room that didn't have any water in it, just to make sure with wiring and stuff. The next day, the contractors came, which was sooner than I expected. They came with the apartment, landlord, I guess.
Yeah, that's part of the reason that we stayed in the apartment, and we stayed close to the apartment, because they said in an email they'd asked if we would be around the apartment by 9 a.m. to let the contractors in and talk to anyone that showed up. So that's part of the reason we needed to be at least very close.
Well, I was really happy that they came so quickly. It was a really good surprise. And they looked at our water heater. The pipe had broken in a couple places, and so they replaced that. And then there was kind of a funny language issue where, because in Japanese you don't have to specify the subject of something when you say it, there was a time where the landlord was speaking to me in pretty fast Japanese, and he was like, do you understand? And I was like, not enough. Can you write it down? And he wrote it down in Google Translate, and it translated as check your water heater, make sure there's no leaks, and then you'll have water. And I was okay.
Then reconnect the water heater, and everything's fine.
And I was like, okay, I understand that. And then he was like, okay, thank you. And he left. And I was like, oh, okay, I didn't know you were leaving, but okay. And then I told Zeb, I was telling him, I think they're going to come back. And he was like, well, when I read this, that makes it sound like we need to do something, check the water.
Yeah, Google Translate puts essentially the subject in the sentence because there's not a subject. And so Google Translate puts it in there, and it says, you.
But even when he wrote it, he didn't write down, watashi wa, or anata wa.
Yeah.
He didn't write a subject.
That's what I'm saying. Google Translate puts one in there. So they
but even if I
a subject.
Look at the original, I couldn't figure it out. So that's why I assumed, because he didn't write a subject, he meant himself. Anyway, we had a little argument about it, and then I was like, well, we'll just see what happens then. And they did come back that afternoon, and they did fix everything, but I was like, I don't know what I'm doing, and I don't know what's going on. But it was fine, and we had water that night, which was way faster than I expected. So anyway, all of that to say, thank you for everyone that reached out. We're doing okay. Uchinada, we're doing better than okay. Uchinada has some structures damaged, and some roads, but overall everyone in this town is doing pretty well. It was probably my scariest experience of life so far, because I don't know, it just is, there would be announcements over the town intercoms that would be everyone stay ready for aftershocks, let's stay safe. The police car that would drive through with the speakers on it would say kiyotsukemashou, kiyotsukemashou, everyone let's be safe. And I was like, how do I be safe? I'm just sitting in my apartment waiting for things to shake.
Yeah, it's one of those things that I always think about. I had this boss that he was really funny, but he would I forget what the phrase was. It was something at the end of the day, or one of those things, and he would always get really upset because he was like, what does that even mean? He's like, you're just moving air with your body. He's like, that has no meaning. And so I would think about it sometimes, I guess I get it. It's something that people say to try and make you feel better.
What else are you supposed to say?
So it's kind of when people tell you, stay safe. And that's kind of thanks. Like,
but there are some like funny readiness things about Japan that now I kind of understand more. Like, for example, when you drive around in Japan and you go to a parking lot, everyone has backed into their parking spot. And in America...
Yeah, I'd say like 90% of the time, yeah.
It's not like people don't back in, but like most people will just pull into the parking spot, like front ways, pull in. Nobody does that in Japan. And so I don't want to be the only car that's pulled front ways into the parking spot. So a lot of times I'll back in too. And I asked my friend, like, why do people do that here? And she was like, I don't know, I guess we're just ready, you know? And I was like, ready? Like, ready to wheel out of the parking lot at a moment's notice? But now I'm kind of like, yeah, I can get behind that. Like, also they were saying to never let your gas tank on your car get like super low. And I was like, okay, well, that's a bit prepper mindset. But now this week, every time it gets below halfway, I'm like, better fill it up, like better be ready for I don't know what. But and also I thought old houses were really cute and like, oh, let's like get an old house and fix it up. And I have no interest anymore now in like anything built pre-1950s. But it's just interesting.
It's a really wild just
to
experience.
Feel unsafe in a house that, I don't know, to feel like nowhere you can go is safe. And we didn't even have it that bad. I mean, we were not in the epicenter.
Yeah. I guess it's just the dichotomy of like feeling, because I wouldn't say I feel that way necessarily. Like I don't feel unsafe, but...
Not anymore, I don't.
Oh.
Now that it's been a week and the biggest risk of major aftershocks has decreased so much.
Yeah.
And the ones we feel have continued to get weaker and more spread out.
Yeah, I do think it's one of those things that it is like eye-opening because, of course, you know, when you come to Japan, it's always something that can happen. Like, it's not, like, there's always going to be the chance of a really big earthquake. And you can look, you know, historically, they happen somewhat regularly. And they are spread out around the country, so there's not really maybe one area that gets...
Well, I thought our coast was safe.
That's what everyone says, that Ishikawa gets the least amount of natural disasters. Yeah, so it's interesting, but then it actually does happen, and you're here to experience one of the bigger earthquakes in recent like history, certainly in the past decade. And so then it's funny like to be here and have experienced that, and then it becomes real. Like, oh yeah, like so that's what it's like, and oh yeah, that can happen, and so that's what it's like when it happens.
It's very humbling.
Yeah, I think a bit humbling, and then also it does like, I guess it's easy to just imagine that it won't happen to your area, and so then you're living in Japan and you're kind of in this safe bubble, but then it does happen, and so then it becomes easy to imagine it happening in your area.
I mean, I guess that's why the police cars and all the town speakers are like, everybody, let's be prepared. Like now I have my earthquake emergency bag packed and ready by the door.
Yeah, but I guess that's also the thing like we were talking a little bit about before, that one, you can't be prepared 24/7. Like even if you try,
the first night we were back,
exhausting.
I slept in my clothes because I was like, if we have sirens, I need to get out the door as quick as possible.
Yeah, but of course you can't. I mean, you
can't live
keep doing
like that.
But yeah, at some point it detrimentally affects your quality of life, and yeah, it's just interesting to see it from that point of view. And then it's also really interesting how quickly people move on from, because we were talking about when we came back to Kanazawa, it was almost like nothing had happened.
It wasn't impacted that much, but you'd be just walking down the street and it would feel super normal, and then you would notice that like a stone lantern had broken, or like the banister had fallen over.
Or at one point we were driving by and there was like, you know, a building that had burned down, and then there's like other stuff like that you see like little pockets of what happened, but because in our area, even though we're so close, it's relatively, but then it's weird because yeah, you're right next to people that did have their lives so like turned upside down. Yeah. But then around you, like the bakery's still open and you can go by.
Get back to normal.
Yeah. And that's kind of what I was telling Annie, that it almost sometimes seems like it went back to normal like too fast. Like I think for some people it went back to normal
Zeb
as
needed
soon
like
as
a debrief.
Not like a debrief, but I think it's unfortunate, and this is maybe me like thinking about it too much. I think it's unfortunate that it moved on so quickly. Not that like the event needs some like reverence, or like you need to like have some respect for the power of nature and like sit there and like give it some thought and think about what happened.
You just wanted more of like a recognition for like gratitude of that we're okay, or
I guess, and just like the situation and just giving it more thought. Like some people, I think they had their like little evacuation moment and then they went straight back to their houses, and for them nothing changed. And so I just think it's interesting that you can go back.
Maybe it's healthier to just be like, well, nothing changed, like let's just get back to life. Maybe. And not dwell on
I'm not saying dwell. I'm just saying like the Marie Kondo, like, show a little bit of appreciation and then you can pack it up and ship it on. Like, you don't need to dwell on it. And like, I feel like, because I feel like I moved on relatively fast, but then we came back and it's just like, life is so normal. I don't know. It's just really,
well, it still really is very not normal in the Noto Peninsula. And just as a general, like a wider update beyond just our bubble in Uchinada, since the 7.6 magnitude earthquake, there have been over 1,000 aftershocks. I think only 10 or 12 of those have been above a level 5, and none have been significantly damaging, but, still unsettling.
I mean, if you think about even like a 5, that's what we felt here. So they felt that at least, 10 more times.
I do have to correct that in the last episode, it would have been 24 hours, and we were like, oh, there have only been 30 deaths so far. There now have been 168 confirmed deaths, and 323 people are still unaccounted for. And so it has been sad to see that number increase, and I hope that has, stabilized now.
And it's really interesting to think about, and this is one of the things I'll figure out today, because I still don't know, and this is about things moving on quickly or not quickly. Like, I think I mentioned in the last episode that my coworker at my night school, her family is from Wajima, and so she goes up there like every chance she gets to spend with her elderly parents. They also have a tortoise that's like 20 years old or something, and so it's like she goes up there, and I imagine she has this like quirky, I don't know what's going on up there, but it sounds funny. But I feel like I'm sure she was up there for the New Year's.
Well, yeah, because see family.
Yeah, every weekend that I talk to her, like after work,
well, hopefully
I'm like,
you'll see her at work today, because it'll be your first day back at work.
Yeah, and so I got an email that asked me if I was okay, and it was from the Board of Education. And I emailed him back, and I told him, like, we're doing okay. But then I asked, I was like, can you let me know
check on my coworker?
If my coworker's okay? And he never emailed me back.
Oh.
And then my supervisor from my school called.
Maybe that's too personal. Like, maybe he can't share personal information. I don't know.
And that's what I asked him. I told him, like, if it's okay, can you let me know? And then my supervisor eventually called me from school. And I told him kind of the same thing. I was
from your different school.
Yeah, I was like, my coworker at my night school, like, was probably in Wajima. Is there any way, like, you can check? And he was like, I don't really know.
Yeah.
So I guess I'm just going to go.
Hopefully you'll find out today at work. But the roads now, and I don't know if you can hear the helicopter in the background right now, but there are helicopters that have been able to get to the more remote areas of the Noto Peninsula to provide aid. And actually, the roads are clear enough for access to 2 main cities and 2 towns in Okunoto, like the region of Noto that has Suzu, Wajima, Noto Town, Anamizu. It's like the hardest hit areas. They do have a statement that's asking people to not travel there in personal vehicles. So even though you can get there, they're saying don't get there. Like, don't bring any personal donations up there, and don't try to come visit people. Which makes sense. There's a lot of like one-way sections between towns, and a lot of large vehicles can't pass. But slowly they are able to provide aid, and I think most people, if they would like to leave, can leave.
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm thinking about. I guess specifically with that coworker, that if she was up there, I don't want her to have to feel like she needs to leave her parents to come back to work. But I'm sure she feels that pressure. So
well, hopefully, I don't know. In my mind, I mean, I'm not experiencing this, but if I had a car, I would probably be like, okay, parents, like, get in my car and let's all leave. Like,
that's true. Yeah, we talked about this too. There are a lot of interesting news stories about people that are, and I'm not saying they're not trapped, but there would be a news story about someone who they couldn't get in touch with their parents. So one instance, the guy drove all the way from Tokyo, and he like got to his parents. And
but he had to walk for 3 hours because at that point the road.
We had to walk an hour and a half.
Oh, well,
still a lot.
Still. But the road wasn't passable.
Yeah, then he talked about how like, oh, they like need aid and everything, and it's kind of like, well, you got there, and like, can't you get your parents to your car, and then you
maybe not though, because of elderly.
Yeah, people. Maybe they're so old, but
like, yeah, you could walk water out to them, but that's kind of scary, and difficult. But apparently I don't know if we mentioned this, but the whole peninsula has been subject to what they're calling an earthquake swarm for the last 3 years. And so this event was not only like a big deal in Japan, being one of the largest earthquakes in recent decades, but specifically Noto Peninsula, it's the largest earthquake. Previously, the largest earthquake was the level 6 that was in May, and now this is the strongest earthquake that's hit since records began in 1885. So it's not just like an uncommon thing for us. It's like, because you got a message from one of your Japanese friends that was like, I hope you're okay. Like, this is also weird for Japanese people.
Yeah.
And
then he had the same thing. He was like, you should run if it happens again. And we were like,
okay, we'll try.
Yeah, like, okay.
And the tsunami that followed the earthquake didn't bother us at all here, but it did affect Suzu on the tip of Noto Peninsula. And the mayor in Suzu said that unfortunately 90% of their structures are either damaged or destroyed, and that the tsunami was large enough to wash some homes off their foundations and sweep some cars into the ocean. Yeah. So that's pretty scary. And at least 780 people across 30 districts in that area, in the remote villages, they had to be helped through helicopters. And so that's why I think there's been so much like destruction and damage and everything on the news, because it is a pretty remote area that is hard to bring help to. And hopefully that keeps getting better.
And it's something that we didn't really know until we did that monitor tour, but I don't know if you remember, they talked about how Noto is often romanticized, like within Japan, as this place that is still, historical, and it's like remote. Yeah. And so it is true to an extent. Like when you get up there, it does feel very remote. And they've filmed like historically a bunch of movies up there because of the scenery, and you can still feel it.
Like the collapsed homes in Wajima that you'll see on the news, you might notice that a lot of them are wooden structures, and a lot of them were built before the current building regulations were imposed in 1981. And there's such an elderly population up there. And so I think all of that contributed to how much destruction there was up there. So it's like sad in multiple ways. And then Wajima also had a fire because of the earthquake, and 200 buildings burned because of the fire. So not only were the buildings shaken, they were then burned. And that's sad because the Asaichi morning market is a 1,000-year-old shopping market that is gone. And I mean, I hope that it can be rebuilt one day, but I just think that it will take a long time for it to return to the vibrancy, I guess, that it had. And you can never get the age back. But
yeah, and I'm sure a lot of those buildings weren't necessarily that old, and like when you had walked through the morning market, there was an interesting mix of like architecture. Mm-hmm. But yeah, some of it is like quirky history that even when we were there, we were pointing out there was this weird building that looked like you were going into a Roman bath. It had all this like weird.
It was just a facade. Like you couldn't go into the building, but they had all this money, and they decorated the outside to look like a marble columns, and had all these like statues of Venus and stuff.
And so we had also been in like an antique store, and now all those antiques are gone. So it's just really interesting to think about not only the super old history, but also some of the more recent kind of additions to the history.
Yeah, I was reading an article that economists think that the national GDP for this year is going to drop by 23 to 50 billion yen, which is about $160 million to $350 million. And they're basing that on the assumption that the 7 cities in Ishikawa that were hardest hit are just going to stagnate for 2 weeks to a month. I feel like they're going to stagnate for longer than that. But
well, yeah, if you think about Wajima in particular, one, like, even if they can rebuild the roads up there within a month, well, it's winter now, so people aren't really going to be like rushing up there. And then if the market's not there, there is other really cool stuff to see in that area.
Well, that's why I think, so 350 million seems like it is a lot of money, but if you compare it to, like, in 2011, the Great East Earthquake, that was the equivalent of $66 billion of GDP loss. And then the 1995 Hanshin earthquake in Kobe, that was $32 billion. So it's like nothing comparatively, but I feel like it lost so much more in potential because the Noto area, I think maybe this is just because we live near here, but I feel like it was getting primed to become a really popular tourist area. And we were going on that monitor tour to try to get more cycling tourism. There was that kind of modeling photo shoot experience that I had, and they spent a whole day just in Wajima to photograph and promote just that area. And now they're not going to have any of those tours or ability to host anyone. But I just think the potential, it's sad how much potential is lost, I guess.
Yeah, and it's really interesting too, because the potential, and then also even really not even just, like, I guess both sides, like what was currently there and also the potential for future stuff being there. But just thinking about, and I've mentioned it on previous podcasts, but Wajima really is like one of my favorite cities in Ishikawa, just because of the feel that it has. And so it's unfortunate to think about, oh, that's not, I don't know, it's just going to be different. Like there's going to be a different vibe up there. But then also, just thinking about like the Noto tour that we did with just our personal bikes, like thinking about, just how nice that was. And that's something that I would definitely recommend that people do. And now thinking about right now, obviously you can't do it
right now, but
and I don't know when you'd be able to do it again, because this is like
with
a
hotels and things. There were already not a lot of hotel options, so.
Yeah, and this is a small like personal aside for us, just thinking about future impact, like even for what we want to do, but just the way that with natural disasters, the way roads get closed, even for cycling, like I haven't ridden my road bike outside.
I know, I've been scared to ride.
I'm not scared to ride, but it does feel, so within the cycling community, and I've referenced this with Annie, was like during the COVID pandemic, like when it initially started, within the cycling community, there were a bunch of people that felt like, oh, you shouldn't go for a bike ride, even if you're on your own. And I guess the idea was like, well, if you crash, then you become like clog in the medical system, because
like a liability for people who needed the hospital for other things.
Yeah, because you were just trying to like participate in your hobby and you didn't really need it. And so that's, to a certain extent, that's kind of how it feels now. Like I hardly ever have an accident on my bike, but
thankfully.
This would be the worst time
to
have one. And so part of me thinks about that, and then also part of me thinks about, even after like really serious like rainstorms, you'll go out for a ride and you'll have to,
landslides will happen.
Yeah, you'll have to completely remap like in your head which roads are okay to ride and which ones you can use. And I feel like it's even worse now.
Well, because this time of year with snow and things, a lot of the roads that go into the mountains are closed because of snowfall or landslides. And so we ride along the coast, but now I don't want to ride along the coast because the earthquake might have damaged coastal roads. So in my head, I'm like, well, I don't know which one, like where I should ride. And it's not dangerous. I mean, I would just start riding, and then if the road's closed, I'll turn around.
Yeah.
But
it's not like a life-threatening thing in any way. It's just interesting to think about like personal impacts. And I guess personally for me too, just thinking about, there are so many places here in Ishikawa that I really like, and I really like them because they're a beautiful place to ride a bike. And at least one of those I already haven't been able to go back to because of that rainstorm. It's the one over near Oyabe. It's like the really pretty, like really narrow road.
Oh yeah.
And it got like totally washed off the side of the mountain. And there's like a really cool waterfall back there, and you just can't go to it now because there's not a road. And so just thinking about that now, like, oh, like that trip we did in Noto, and I guess it's very selfish to like think about it, but I'm sure that there are places now that I don't know if we'll be able to go back to. So it's really interesting.
Yeah. Well, I did want to mention that if you feel like you want to donate to the Ishikawa Earthquake Relief Fund, we'll put links in the show notes. There's a link that's only in Japanese for the prefecture itself, and I don't know if you can donate money from overseas to that one, but I'll also link an article from TokyoWeekender.com that was in English, and they have links that are also in English if you want more information or if you can donate.
And I think it's like important to mention there too that obviously were not great sources of information.
Yeah, this is just some personal anecdotes, but there's a lot more news that we didn't cover in this little
Well, that's what
rambling.
I was going to say about with the news is like I don't know, it's like a weird time to be like online. But you've probably also seen in the news, like there were news stories about false news stories where people were reposting videos from the 2011 earthquake and then asking for donations. And there were these scam sites that people were setting up.
So just be careful. I mean, always, but.
And then there's been a lot of that.
It's sad that people do that.
I know, it's really interesting that. And then there have been other like false narratives that this was like a man-made earthquake. I don't know how that became a story.
How would that even be a possibility?
Yeah, it's a little bit of hubris to think that like we're so strong we can
we just shook up the peninsula to make some political drama.
Yeah, it's really weird. So it's a weird time to be online, but I guess if you're like reading about the Ishikawa earthquake, I guess just be like a little careful because there are some weird stories out there or weird scams going on where people are trying to steal money or just trying to get stuff from you. But
yeah. Well, for the rest of the podcast this week, I wanted to talk about some more fun New Year's things because this is what I had initially planned to tell you about last week. 2024 just happened. I guess we're 9 days into it now, but it's the year of the dragon if you're following the Chinese zodiac, the New Year. And it's specifically the wood dragon. And I didn't know that every year, I didn't know until this year that not only are the years cycling through the 12 zodiac animals, they're also cycling through elements like wood and fire and water and
like metal and some other stuff.
So the previous wood dragon years were 1904 and 1964. So 60 years is a special year if you're into the wood dragon.
But I guess is that like every single element attached to every animal? I guess every single one's on a 60-year cycle. So like the next 12 years when we have another dragon year, it will be a different element dragon year. Yeah. So that's where it gets interesting that, you hear about people and then, like which animal is compatible with which animal. Then like you can get even deeper. It's like, well, they're like a wood dragon, but you're a fire ox. So because I have no idea. I'm the year of the rat, and I have no idea what element I was. But this apparently is the luckiest year. The dragon is the only mythical animal in the zodiac. And I read that people born in the year of the dragon, if you are into this, they're likely to be leaders, active and powerful. They take initiative. They're creative. So a lot of good traits for entrepreneurs. So I don't know. Some people, if it's really important to them, I have heard of some people who are like, I'm gonna have this baby, like I'm gonna wait to have the baby in the year of the dragon, or they like plan like when they're having like families around, like
that's
the cycle of
that's more what I mean. If you're having a baby, you can't really
not just
plan like hold it in, but the year of the dragon is like a popular year to have a kid. And did you know that the rat was the first animal in the calendar, in the zodiac calendar? Oh, I didn't know that until I was.
Well, I've just read about this because in one of the JET things I did, it was actually the one where I was working with the English department to talk to prospective English teachers. Another ALT that was there, actually two other ALTs that were there, were super into astrology or like the zodiac animals. And so we all like looked up they like knew it down to like a T. They knew like every single like bit about every single relationship, like
that's kind of
intertwining. Cool. It was really interesting. It's personally for me, I think it's like just an interesting like tidbit.
I don't believe in it, but I like to hear about it. So
yeah, it was pretty fascinating like talking to them because they were like really into it. Yeah. So you could tell them, but then they even get down like to it's like, okay, and this sounds like how people get scammed out of their like security questions, but it gets down to like, okay, what time were you born and like what place were you born? Because I guess the place and the time affects like the stars. So then it like,
interesting.
Which hemisphere you're in can impact like the leaning of your like elemental. I don't know. It was a lot.
Yeah, I didn't know any of that, but so when I was reading about where the zodiac animals came from, a race was organized by the Jade Emperor. He's one of the most important gods in traditional Chinese religion, and he invited all the animals in the world to take part. I guess there were only 12 animals in the world in this story. And the 12 species were a pig, dog, rooster, monkey, sheep, horse, snake, dragon, rabbit, tiger, ox, and rat. And then, each year of the zodiac is named after each one, and then the race would determine the order that the years would be placed. And the rat was apparently on the ox's head when they were swimming or something, and he jumped off and he won. So a little bit sneaky.
Yeah, a little mischievous.
Yeah. And the poor pig was last. So I don't know. I guess that's expected. I would expect the snake to be last because he's the smallest. And if the rat got a ride, then
I don't know how that works.
The sheep, monkey, and the rooster work together, though, in the race.
Oh, that's friendly.
That's friendly.
Yeah, I'm a sheep.
I know.
That's what I am.
Apparently collaborative, maybe.
Maybe.
And the dragon was 5th because he stopped to help farmers extinguish a fire. So
it's very friendly.
Yeah, a little note in the story about how helpful dragons were. So welcome, Year of the Dragon.
Yeah, here we are.
They're also, in Japan, they pick a kanji every year. And it's voted on, so it's a little bit different than the Pantone color of the year.
Which I didn't even know was a thing. When I think of something of the year, I think the Merriam-Webster word of the year.
The Pantone color of the year is as an aside, it's kind of different because they predict, so they'll pick the color of the year now for 2024 as kind of a trend predictor. So peach fuzz is the color of 2024 from Pantone. Says it captures our desire to nurture ourselves and others, a velvety, gentle peach tone whose all-embracing spirit enriches mind, body, and soul. So I don't know if that's how you feel about peach fuzz, but it's really, odd because...
It also is a terrible name. When I think of peach fuzz, I don't think of a beautiful color.
I know, I think of a teenage boy who hasn't figured out how to shave yet. But anyway.
In my life. Here I am.
But the color of the year is predicting. The kanji of the year, you vote on it and it's about the previous year. It's supposed to be one kanji that summarizes
the Webster word of the year.
The year was.
Yeah, very similar.
Do you want to say what the kanji of 2023 was?
It was ze.
Which is tax. Which sounds like 2023 was a terrible year, but it was announced the Japan Kanji Aptitude Testing Foundation announced the pick, and it's a tradition that started in 1995. And according to the foundation, the public chose the kanji due to tax hikes and cuts being heavily covered in the news, discussed among policymakers, with many feeling anxious about the increasing prices of gas and everyday goods.
Yeah,
that's what they said about it.
It makes sense because it's been a pretty volatile year with consumer good prices, particularly energy. Mm-hmm. And so there have been a lot of news topics about tax incentives or tax give backs for people so they can afford to live more easily. And then there's also been a lot in the news that the current prime minister is extremely unpopular, some of the lowest ratings ever in the history of a Japanese prime minister. So he's been discussing a lot of tax cuts to try and, I guess, make the people
There's also apparently a new invoice system and debates around this program where you can make tax payments go to a municipality of your choice in return for gifts, and they're kind of changing that up apparently, so it's been on people's minds. But the chief priest of the Kiyomizu-dera temple, the temple in Kyoto, they write the kanji and they're really fancy, trained calligraphy, and I just think it's kind of a funny image where this very formal priest has to write such a modern complaint in this pretty way. He just has to write tax really big and in fancy writing. But that's 2023 kanji. Last year, for example, or just to compare, the kanji was not that much happier. It was actually war. It was sen, the kanji for war.
I guess due to the Ukraine situation.
Yeah, Russia's invasion.
So it'd be really interesting to see what's next year, 2024, what's the word going to be? Because that one,
yeah,
it's already been a hectic year.
In 2014, yeah, that's true. With the earthquake and the plane crash. And
it's been a lot.
It's only been a week into this year.
I know.
But this is the second time that the kanji for tax has been chosen. Actually, 10 years ago in 2014.
Oh, that's interesting.
It was voted on that year also. So
it's funny that you can, I guess it makes sense.
You can just pick it over and over.
But yeah, that you can just reuse.
Yeah.
Because usually, I feel like the Webster word of the year is usually like more of a cultural insight to...
you do get kind of a cultural insight in a way. And it's nice that it gets voted on by the people and not just some pack of like color predictors at Pantone come together at a board
meeting. This color
meeting.
thing really set you off.
I really like the Pantone color because I think it's interesting and I like the design aspect of it, but it is kind of like funny and kind of hoity-toity in a way to be like, well, we predict that peach fuzz will be just the all-encompassing color of 2024. But
it's a little weird, yeah.
Speaking of trend predictions,
yeah,
have you gotten your omikuji, your fortune yet from the shrine?
Because the last fortune I got was the most abysmal. Remember?
No.
The one that we got in Tokyo
with my family? That was back in April.
Yeah, I'm never going back, ever.
Zeb got, like, worst fortune.
It was literally, like, even the old guys next to us were like, that's the worst fortune you can get. I was like, thanks. So I'm going to leave that in 2023.
Yeah.
And then going forward,
riddance.
I'm just going to...
Never pick a fortune again.
Yeah, experience life fortuneless.
Wow. Well, omikuji literally means sacred lot. And it's a random paper fortune you can get from a shrine or a temple. And you kind of donate 100 yen and you pick a piece of paper. Sometimes you'll donate 100 yen and then you'll shake this cylinder until a stick falls out and the stick has a number on it, and then you draw your fortune from that numbered drawer. But during the new year and when I went to Oyama Jinja in Kanazawa, everyone wants their fortune, so they just kind of have a big box of fortunes, and you just drop your money in and pick one out of the box. So there can be different levels of good, neutral, or bad, and Zeb got the worst bad, and I got Suekichi, which is good luck to come, which is kind of good because it's like a future good luck. Yeah.
It is interesting because I guess the fortune I got was from a temple, so I haven't ever been to a shrine.
Maybe you'll have better luck at a shrine.
Maybe, yeah. Maybe the Shinto gods prefer me to the Buddhist, so maybe.
Well, if you do get a bad fortune, you don't have to be too upset about it because you can tie it there at the shrine or the temple and basically leave your bad luck there. And I didn't realize a lot of times they'll have a designated place to tie your fortunes, and you'll see these little paper things decorating strings almost. It looks like decorations, but they're fortunes that people have tied up to leave. And it used to be that you would tie them to a pine tree, but then to protect the pine tree now, you'll just tie them near a pine tree on the designated thing. But that's because matsu is how you say pine, and matsu is also the pronunciation for the verb to wait. So it's like, as in wanting your bad luck to wait and not follow you home. So you have an option if you gamble and you get bad luck. But I got...
Yeah, you can just tie it up and go back and get another one. Keep going until you get a nice one.
Yeah. No, you're not supposed to do that, though. As an unsettling aside, when I Google translated my fortune under the good luck to come thing, they have all these kind of vague predictions, and one of them was trembling in a great, it was like shaking in a great tremor. And I was like, okay, I've already had that, so no thank you.
Don't need it again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you didn't have to go to work yesterday.
No, so today will be my first day back at work, which is my school night. So right now I'm not at work. But I didn't have to go yesterday because it was a holiday. So we talked about it last year, but yesterday was coming of age day.
Yeah.
This was very exciting. And it's really just kind of like, it's for everyone that year that's going to turn 20. So it's kind of like a national birthday almost, where you celebrate with your friends. But yeah, I guess I think it's nice.
Turning 20, you're like a legal adult in Japan. And we talked about it before on a podcast, but this year you were going to talk specifically about what they do in Kitakyushu.
Yeah, which I can't remember if we talked about this last year.
We might have talked about this already.
So, yeah, I'll just briefly mention that there's one town where the idea is like you dress up and it's like very ceremonial. But there's one interesting town down near Fukuoka, and they kind of adopted the idea that it's because it's their last day as like kids, and then after this they need to go be, I guess real adults. They dress up in like really crazy outfits.
Yeah, like more is more. Like
really
huge,
over the top.
Huge hairstyles, like really extravagant, like not just kimonos, but like kimonos with like trailing robes and like neon colors.
Yeah, it's just really over the top. So
but
if you're really curious,
cool.
You can look up like coming of age day in Kitakyushu and see some really wild outfits.
Yeah.
And some of them they spend like crazy amounts of money.
And they coordinate with their friends. So like everyone will have the neon pink hairstyles or the bright green kimono. And
I think it's really interesting, but then sometimes I do think about, in America, it's so common for there to be age gaps between you and your friends. Like you don't, like maybe you're friends with like a senior, but you're a junior in high school. And so you age very differently. So it almost seems like, I don't know, a little unfortunate, because even in the same grade, often we have different varying ages. So sometimes it seems a little unfortunate. Like, what if you're the 19-year-old and, like your friend group, everyone's like they're celebrating
that's true.
a year ahead of you. And so then when you turn 20, it's like, well, my friends already celebrated, and I don't know.
True.
It's just interesting. Like, I think it is a nice idea, but then sometimes I think about like the poor guy out there that's like, oh man, like, or all my friends are younger. Like,
yeah. It's a cool tradition though.
It is.
Do you have a word of the week?
I do.
Well, let's hear it.
So mine is kotoshi.
Kotoshi. Okay. I feel like I've heard that, but I don't remember right now.
It's this year.
Oh, yeah. Of course. Kotoshi.
Yeah, which kind of catches you off guard because it's not, it's like, it sounds like it's a weird reading for year. So usually when I hear people say it, I'm like, it doesn't register in my head as like this year. Or sometimes when I go to say it, I always forget. Like I want to say like my Toshi, which I think would be like every year.
Oh, yeah.
Or,
year.
Yeah. And then
the one that throws me off is last year, Kyonen, because Kyo, like a different kanji, same pronunciation. Kyo is today, and so it seems like today year.
Yeah.
But it's the kanji for past, Kyonen.
Yeah.
But it throws me off.
Rainen is next year.
But that one makes sense because Raishu is next week. Rainen is next year.
That's true. I guess I'm usually hearing like the nin part, so that's what I'm thinking. So then when I have to switch to Toshi, I'm like, it messes me up. So I always forget that one. So yeah, this year.
Very nice.
What about you?
Mine is shimekazari, which is a New Year's decoration made from shimenawa, or sacred rope. And you'll see them kind of like how in America you might put a wreath on your door for Christmas or for winter holidays. Yeah. It's kind of like a wreath, but it's a sacred rope. Maybe there'll be an orange or these leaves that are on it, different kind of good luck charms that mean different things. If you want to know more about shimenawa specifically, we talked about that in episode 34, but you'll see them a lot. You'll see the shimekazari. Kazari just means decoration, so like a sacred rope decoration. And you'll see them a lot for the new year to ward off evil spirits and bring luck. And yeah, they're all over doors right now, so
yeah,
nice to see. It is very nice. Well, thanks for listening again, and thanks again to everyone that reached out. CC, Stephen, and Elijah sent us emails to ramblingramsbothams@gmail.com, which was very friendly. And Ben and Celeste messaged our podcast Instagram, and then several other people messaged like different like personal YouTube or things like that. And of course, our family and friends that reached out directly, it meant a lot. So thank you. It was nice to feel checked in on. And I hope everyone listening is safe with whatever you're dealing with at home. And thanks for listening. Yeah, we'll talk to you guys next week. Bye. Bye.